You've got your line art done and you're ready to get coloring. But before you grab that paintbrush tool and go full on Bob Ross, you might want to take a step back and do a little color flatting first. In the world of comics, a flatter's job is to create precise selections and then fill those in with solid colors, otherwise known as flats. These flats are then used by the colorist to help with the rendering process. The colors a flatter uses may not be the same colors the colorist chooses, and that's okay. When it comes to creating flats in Clip Studio Paint, you have a few options, including reference layers. With reference layers, you can quickly flat an image. Here's an illustration I made of a bug that's, not having a good day. The line work is split out on 3 vector layers, one for the windshield, one for the bug, and one for the splat. There's also 3 blank raster layers, one for the windshield color, one for the bug color, and one for the splat. These 6 layers are further organized into 2 groups, a windshield group and a bug group. There's also a color palette layer and a value palette layer. So with the line work on its own layer, or layers as may be the case, this image is ready for flatting. First, minimize the 2 groups, and then create a new raster layer above the paper layer. Name this layer Flats. Switch to the Fill tool and make sure the subtool is set to Refer only to Editing Layer. Select a color and click anywhere on the canvas. This action fills in the entire canvas with the selected color. The next step is to flat the areas of the windshield. This includes the dashboard, the gear, and the wiper blade. But first, you need to set the corresponding line art layer as the reference layer. To do that, select the line layer in the windshield group and click the Set as Reference Layer button. It looks like a little lighthouse. Once it's set, you'll see the same lighthouse icon next to the layer, which indicates that this layer is now a reference layer. Switch back to the Flats layer, and with the Fill tool still selected, switch the subtool to Refer Other Layers. Now before you select another color and start dropping in paint, switch over to the Tool Property palette. There's a few settings here you need to change before flatting. The first setting to turn on, if it's not already on, is Multiple Referring. Once switched on, you can select the Reference layer for this option. There are a few more things you need to set, but let me show you what happens when you don't set them, otherwise things may not make sense. When you hide the lines, you can see the paint overlaps in places you might not expect. Plus, there's some anti-aliasing that's evident by this gradation or a lack of jaggies, which for flatting isn't good. Now this may not be a problem for you, but if you're doing professional flats, you'll need to clean this up. First, turn off anti-aliasing because you don't want any variations in the color or density. Next, make sure the setting for area scaling is switched on. With the area scaling, there are 2 options, shape and width. For the shape, you can choose rectangle, round, or 2 darkest pixel, which recognizes the area with the darkest color or the highest opacity and draws up to that area. I tend to use the round or rectangle option as it produces better results with my line work. For the width, it really depends on the line weight and whether or not those lines are using anti-aliasing. The line work in this illustration does not use anti-aliasing, so I expect to get a clean fill. And because of that, I don't really need to expand the fill, so I can reduce the width to a value of 1. The final option you can set, which I'll do right now, is Fill Up to Vector Path. If you have an older version of Clip Studio Paint, this may be listed as Stop Filling at Center Line of Vector. Anyway, as the name suggests, this setting automatically expands the fill to halfway into the vector line. Now this option only works when your line is on a vector layer, so if that's not the case, you'll need to play with the area scaling settings until you find something that works for you. Speaking of the line work, if your line work does use anti-aliasing, you can either change that to not use it, or you can change the expression color for the ink layer to monochrome. When you use a monochrome expression, tones of gray are not allowed, and therefore no anti-aliasing can occur. Either way, if you're not sure what values and options to use, reduce the opacity of the line work layer before dropping in the paint. This lets you see where and how things fill in. So with those options set and now checked, you can choose some colors and drop them in. When you hide the lines and zoom in, you can see that you've got crisp, clean, and precise flats. If you wanted to clean things up, grab a brush, turn off anti-aliasing, and take care of that now. When you're done, bring the line layer back and finish flatting the windshield group. At this point, you're ready to move on to the bug. Select the bug line layer inside the bug group and click the Set as Reference Layer button to make this the new reference layer. Go back to the flats layer, select a color for the wings, and drop it in. Now pick another color for the bug's feet, hands, and antenna, and also his eyes and eyeballs. Finally, grab a color or two for the bug's main body and drop that in. If at any time you find that the color spills into unwanted areas, you can muck around with the close gap and color margin settings. Alright, all that's left to do is the splat. Switch to the splat line layer and set it as the new reference layer. When you're done, switch back to the flats layer, pick a color, and drop it in. Unfortunately, flatting the splat isn't as easy now because there's more colors on the flats layer. To get around this, you can set a non-reference layer. A non-reference layer is one that will be ignored when using the fill tool. The one you want to ignore in this case is the editing layer. You can set that option using this button. It pops up as Not Refer Editing Layer, which means ignore the editing layer, in other words, the flats layer. You can also muck around with the color margin setting, which indicates the margin of error for treating colors differently. But I think it's easier to just ignore the flats layer altogether. Alright, pick a color, drop in the paint, and boom, instant flat splat. Of course, it also blows out the flats for the windshield wiper, but that's an easy fix. Select the line layer inside of the windshield group, and once again, set it as the reference layer. Go back to the flats layer and drop in the two colors for the wiper blade. When you're done, set the flats layer as the new reference layer because you'll be using that layer as a sort of selection layer when painting. Essentially, what you'll be doing is adding colors to the individual color layers while using the flats layer as your reference. Before you start dropping in colors though, switch off area scaling as it'll produce better results and turn off the option to Not Refer Editing Layer. Starting with the windshield group, pick your colors and drop them in. Then move on to the splat color. And finally add color to the bug and all of his various parts. When you're done, you can hide the flats layer because you won't need it anymore. If you'd like, you can add another raster layer for the background and fill it in with any color you want. And that's it. You're ready to add highlights and shading to this illustration, but I'll tell you what, we'll save that for another time. Well, folks, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed learning how to create flats in Clip Studio Paint. You've only scratched the surface with these tools. My recommendation is to play with all of the settings and options to see what each one does. Have fun, go wild, just don't fly into any windshields.